Hi everybody, we're back again with this HP Pavilion 14. I've read through all of your comments from last week's video, all very useful. Thanks very much to everybody who posted. I've garnered some extra little tips from that, and I'm going to work on this board with those suggestions in mind. First thing here is a number of people were suggesting the possibility that there were components removed from this board. I don't think there were, and I'll tell you why. Firstly, the pads here look very clean. They look like the solder was put on from the factory. If somebody had removed components, I would expect to see flux and the solder just not to be as neat as it is. I think what we're looking at here is a board that can be used in multiple configurations, and depending on what CPU and chipset are used here, you may have more voltage regulation modules in that scenario. But the board in different configurations has different numbers of inductors and MOSFETs, and I think that's what we're seeing here. I don't think any components have been removed. To further substantiate that point, I was sent this image during the week by a subscriber, Thomas. Thank you, Thomas, for sending this image. It's very useful. The motherboard here is DAG7ALMB80 C0 revision C. So it's exactly the same motherboard as what I'm working on, and as you can see, that motherboard is also missing these components. So I think this motherboard has all of the components that it's meant to have out of the factory. Nothing has been removed. A second reason why this image is useful is that it shows the secondary voltages that this person measured on their board. And as you can see, it's got 3.3 volts on this inductor, 5 volts on this inductor, 1.2 volts on this, 1.8 volts on this inductor, and 1.8 volts on the two of these inductors. Now, I had thought last week that there was something wrong here, that these two inductors should have been maybe 1 volt or something like that. But it appears that this motherboard has a 1.8 volt power rail here and a 1.8 volt power rail here. So that is not indicative of a fault. Of course, if I had a full schematic for this motherboard, I would be able to confirm for sure what the voltages are meant to be on all of these inductors. But I was only able to find a schematic that is similar to it. I wasn't able to find the exact same one. I contacted the seller of this motherboard and I was able to get the exact model number of that HP Pavilion. I'll post that in the description above. And if anybody has a schematic for this exact motherboard, I would really appreciate you sending it to me. A number of people in the comments also suggested the possibility of an issue with the DIMM socket on this HP Pavilion. I did a video of one of these before where the pins came loose, and it was these two pins down here. They were literally came away from the solder on the board, and we had to solder them back in position. I did notice that somebody had been working on it before, because there's flux here and you can see where a slight piece of the plastic has been burnt away by a soldering iron. But I did a cursory look of all of the pins and they all seemed fine. Now, because we're still in trouble with this laptop, I'm going to take a closer look with the microscope and see if there are any of the pins that are damaged. So I took a look with my microscope and this is what I found. So with my cursory look, I thought it was just flux that was across these pins, but as you can see there's solder between those first two pins. There's certainly an amount of flux as well that hasn't been cleaned off, but you can see further down there are also another set of pins here that are also bridged. There's solder bridging a couple of pins there. There's damage to the plastic. Another two sets of pins there, another set of pins here and here also bridged together. So we're going to need to get rid of those. So very carefully with my soldering iron, I went along to each set of pins and cleared those bridges. I also touched up all of the other pins. So after clearing all of the bridges with my soldering iron, I went along pin by pin with a needle and just ensured that none of them were connected to the adjacent pins and that they were all firmly soldered to the board. After checking all of the pins on that DIMM socket, both inner and outer, I put in a 4 gig DIMM into the socket, clipped it in and tried to power it on. But it was still doing the same thing. CPU heating up, all the voltages online, but still not showing a display. Now, as you saw in the previous section of this video, I've done my best to undo the damage that was caused by the previous person who was working on this board. I have cleared all the bridges between the pins. I have checked the pins one by one to make sure that they're soldered, but there is also damage to the DIMM socket, and I'm not sure that that can be undone without entirely replacing that DIMM socket. But before doing anything further with that DIMM socket, I'm going to chance flashing the BIOS first. So let me show you how I did that. I've connected my CH341A to my BIOS chip, and the first thing I'm going to do is take a copy of the original BIOS. So I click on the question mark, it's identified the IC, I select the correct one, and I click this button here to read the IC. When it has finished reading the file, I click the button to save, and I save it with the name of the motherboard. I just call it original, and then I timestamp it with the date. So we just click save. I want to drag and drop my BIOS file onto ME Analyzer, and when that opens up, we will be able to see the status of the ME region. Looking at file system state, we see this is initialized. That means the ME region is not clean and we need to clean it. In order to clean the ME region of this BIOS file, we need two things. First of all, we need to know which version of the Flash Image tool to work with the file, and that is shown here. So Flash Image tool 13.0.20.1312. So we need to acquire that version of the Flash Image tool. The second thing we need is a compatible clean ME region for this BIOS file. So if we take note of the version, the SKU and the chipset, we can search online and find a compatible ME region for this BIOS. I searched online and I found the Intel Flash Image tool, and if you click Help and About Flash Image tool, you can see that this is the same version as was specified in the ME Analyzer earlier. Click File and Open, and then select the BIOS file that we just copied from the BIOS IC and click Open. Next, click Build and Build Settings. And when this dialog box opens, the only thing we need to change here is for Generate Intermediate Files, we want to change that value to No and click Close. Next, I click File, Save As, and we save it as an XML file. So I just call it the name of the board itself. In the folder where I saved that XML file, you'll see that we have another folder here and then decomp. So if we go into decomp, we can see that this is the breakdown of the BIOS file, and in there we have ME subpartition. This is the piece that we need to replace. Online, I found a good copy of the ME region for this BIOS. So I'm going to paste that into this folder. I'm going to copy the name and then delete the existing ME subpartition.bin file, and I'm going to rename my clean ME region with that same name. Next, I open Flash Image tool again. I click File and Open, and this time I open my XML file. I click Build Image. I click Yes to this prompt, and it builds me a new Flash image file. The file that it creates by default is called outimage.bin. So we want to check that before loading it. So I want to drag and drop this onto ME Analyzer. And when we drag it onto ME Analyzer, we see that now it says our file system state is configured. Going back to my AS Programmer, I've loaded in my outimage.bin file with our clean ME region, and now I need to click here to unprotect, erase, program and verify. After cleaning the ME region on our BIOS and flashing our BIOS IC, it's still doing the same thing. I powered it on, the CPU is getting warm, the voltages are coming online, but I'm still not getting any display. So I'm not sure what is happening with this. A number of people last week asked about plugging in a keyboard. When I plug in the keyboard, I'm not getting any light on the numlock key. So that's where I am with this one at the moment. Really, the purpose of me doing this video, it's my first foray into cleaning the ME region and trying to do that in a video. What I would appreciate is if anybody out there, maybe Nick in particular, who's familiar with cleaning the ME region, could look through what I've done here, see if you think that I've done it properly, and I will document it properly in a separate file. I already have a Word document which I'm happy to share, but I just want to confirm that everything is okay with the procedure that I have done here. I have 4 more of these boards that are also power on and no display, so I will certainly get a lot of practice in cleaning ME regions and flashing BIOSes in the upcoming weeks. Stay tuned for that, and I'll be back with another video next week.